Hi, local main character Zep here, and I have a bit of an issue on my hands. I like Lucky Charms, but I want something with all of the nutritional value and sugar, but none of the other appeal. Oh boy! Mid! Remember that 2018 Kickstarter that a bunch of gaming publications gushed about? Yeah, Temtem, a game by Crema that with no hidden agenda is an attempt to be a critique on a very popular franchise.
You, a bright-eyed child, travel through an archipelago after getting a starter monster in a rock-paper-scissors element triangle to become a Temtem tamer. Along the way, you encounter tough dojo battles guarded by tamers and puzzles. Blocking your progress is an evil clan, a crime syndicate bent on taking over the world. And oh yeah, there's also a free competitive battle sim and team builder with the subtitle Showdown.
Yes, teacher! I did my homework! Okay, but seriously, I don't think you can call everything in the monster-catching genre, you know, a ripoff of a game from February 1996. It's like if you started every video game review about a platformer with you play as Sonic, and just take that to the bank for the entire 3-minute review. Who would do that? However, Temtem is a bit of a different case because every single one of its mechanics acts in almost exact parody to a mechanic that Game Freak has featured. Almost as an exact critique or an alteration that they wanted to comment on. The game does nothing to throw you off the scent, nor does it wear any deodorant to hide it.
You have a team of 6 monsters, complete with 1 to 2 types, a passive or triggered effect, 4 moves, and what amount to EVs and IVs. This game twists the formula a bit by shifting the game mechanics towards competitive battles. Each competitive battle starts with a team selection, pick and ban phase like, ew, league, yucky. Every battle is a double battle, not unlike the Colosseum games and standard VGC gameplay. Moves always hit, eliminating RNG. To balance this out, they can have timers until they can be used or reused or higher stamina costs. This game essentially has an MP system with its moves, forcing you to manage your resources. Do you want to rest a turn and get stamina back, or pay HP to make up for the total stamina cost of a move when you're running low, and be forced to rest the next turn from overexertion? What if it's just better to swap out? What if it's better to use a cheaper move? What if the world was made of pudding?
The game, which has more status effects than does elemental types, is an execution of an idea that peaked in around 2015. The idea that a certain franchise would be better off as a grindy MMO with a tough, mature story and better competitive mechanics. It was a direct response to X and Y, an easy game that lacked much complexity. By all means, it was a baby game for babies. People overwhelmingly wanted a darker game, one with murder and moral grayness, i.e. the moral quandary of the good guys doing bad things sometimes, so maybe the enemy fascists are actually right. Temtem is exactly that game, executed in real life, and, well, it's not on the list.
Even though Temtem executes its competitive gameplay with calculated precision, it has some misunderstanding of the genre it's based upon. The monster-catching MMO idea that's at its core is rooted in a time when the only form of acceptable gaming on the internet was hardcore gaming, leaving the other elements that make video games fun kind of by the wayside. People had something to prove back then, especially since most people on the internet who were vocal about things were...
Oh, sorry, that's the wrong sign. That's, the same thing. That says the same thing. That's the same thing again! God damn it!
A competitive monster collection MMO with an edgy story is obviously seen as the more niche genre that it actually is now that more people can actively make their voices heard. It's a genre meant for a specific kind of teen to adult. Yeah, that's the one.
The game has a bit of an identity crisis outside of its main, tightly defined, grindy MMO gameplay loop. The art direction is a big example of this.
Generally speaking, the game is good to look at. It's bright and has this flat, toony style that works to make its environments pop and not pop in. Sometimes the best texture is no texture at all. However, the character designs of the humans seem not really there. Everyone looks like a create-a character rather than a character designed by an artist, which is understandable. This is a small indie team working on this game. All of the child characters mostly pass, but the adult characters are somewhat strange to look at. They have these comparatively beady eyes without much change to their proportions, so they clash with everyone else. I'd much rather them also have the big toony eyes compared to these weirdly more realistic eyes. The skin color options are also a bit strange since they're mostly monotoned, which looks off on most of the characters, but especially appear odd on darker skinned characters who lack the proper undertones to give them warmth and life. The human characters blur together as kinda samey at times because they lack diversity in body shape and facial features, a strange thing to not port over from this game's biggest inspirations, whose character designs often carry the games into memorability. Even the Temtems themselves have a similar apprehension to go big. Of course, all of them have a particular vibe they try to evoke, but they're mostly just inoffensive. There will be some that you like more than others, but they all seem to have their edges sanded off in the fear of being too crazy looking or dumb. It's a fear that most of the larger franchises have thrown aside, if not out of necessity. This Digimon is a nun, and this one is a gun. This lizard that's also a motorcycle has two camps of people who hate it and who love it, who are both ready to kill each other and their families. That's actually a good thing.
These designs ought to draw out a strong emotional response from people, whether that be I like it to I would like to kill it. Temtem just kind of settles for I guess I'll take it.
Even the evolutions are too afraid to deviate from each other. They look like the stages of maturity of one monster instead of different species in their own right, which would be fine if they weren't considered different species and were just child and adult forms, but they're not. Sure, you can find examples in other series like Grimer and Muck or the Pommy line, but most times the color palette at least changes and the physiology is different. Being blank but bigger is usually an outlier, not the standard. And as for series like Digimon, well, all of the designs in this game settle for being inoffensive to the people who they aren't for at the cost of not being super lovable to the people who they are for. None of these creatures would start a 1,000-page-long thread arguing the merit of a trash bag that's your friend or the implication of a lizard that's also a cool motorcycle.
I mean, Edward Snowden made his whole career out of leaking Klefki in 2013, and they arrested him for that. Actually, I'm gonna look that up real fast. Sorry guys, that is not what Edward Snowden leaked. All other monster collecting games kind of have a vibe to them. Temtem's vibe is collectible monsters you'll sorta be okay with. This vibe confusion stretches out to the main story, which is on all levels vibrating with motion.
It makes me yeek out! All of the dialogue seems long-winded for the interactions they're for, having diamond dialogue trees for even standard tamer battles, but it becomes especially annoying on the number of quests that are, hey, talk to this person all the way across the map, and then talk to me again for an okay consumable or a nigh necessary gameplay mechanic to be unlocked.
There's a reason why killing boars is a prototypical MMO quest. It makes you play the game. With these back and forth missions, playing the game is an obstacle to beating it, especially since you'll be retreading areas where the encounters are underleveled, and even clipping wild grass will send you into...
To make reference to the game that this one bases most of its mechanics off of, Temtem uses the pre-key item experience share system, meaning that only monsters actively in the battle get experience. Many fans complained about the EXP share making the game easier in X and Y, but it was a consequences of that game's EXP curves not accurately accounting for the change, making you over-leveled.
Now that they've addressed that issue, the EXP share is a quality of life feature. A quality of life feature the Temtem devs call you a coward for using.
The experience share equivalents in this game are the Coward's Cloak and the Coward's Blanket. The Cloak is like the old experience share system, just an equip item that you can put on one of your monsters that takes some of the experience of the battling monster and shares it with the one it's equipped to. And the Blanket working like the new system, giving experience to the whole team, but you get it much, much later on. Of course, part of the intention of the name is to imply that your Tems aren't seeing battle, but other names can do that, like Voyeur Lens, Bystander Badge, Scouting Scope, or the in-item description Cogno Cloak. A conscious choice was made to insult you for wanting to have fun.
They chose to call your Tems, and therefore you, cowards for wanting to avoid the least enriching part of the game. Tedious grinding. The whole experience feels like padding, and when you do get to the plot, it feels like one of those fan games that Nintendo would immediately strike down that ask the question, what if Team Rocket were terrorists? A question that TPCI has already asked and answered. And every other hobby, Annie, while we're at it, I won't dive into spoilers for those who do want to play the game, but the tone seems really confused. They clearly want to do a dark, brooding game with gray morals, but those gray morals boil down to what if the good guys were bad sometimes, except the good guys aren't really shown being that bad, the villains are shown doing worse, and also for some reason they have a random colonization subplot that they just kind of throw away. It wanted to have a mature plot to contrast Game Freak's creations, but honestly, their plots have been more mature in recent years and have had darker elements since the inception of the series. I'm not sure if they actually ever wanted to say anything with the game's plot other than, we're not a kid's game. It comes off as really, really cynical, if not balanced out by the true care that was put into the competitive elements of the game. I always have an issue when there's a line drawn between darker themes and kids' media, because kids' media is literally meant to help children cope with these heavier topics. Most seasons of Kamen Rider have some form of genocide happen, but don't tell me that the man literally dressed up as an orange on store shelves now to sell to children is a brooding story meant to be put on HBO. It doesn't have to be adult media for you to like it. You can like kids' media. Hell, you can even like kids' media and still call it what it is. It's a story written in a way that kids can understand it too. Kids have all of the same emotions as an adult. Stories help convey those emotions and help them understand them. What's not clicking? Temtem is hell-bent on making up for all of the perceived weaknesses in its muse that it doesn't really emulate any of its strengths. So much of the game shares design elements from the game that it's based on, and so transparently so. They literally bought a fan artist's Fakemon design and put it in the game. The writing is on the wall, precisely right here on the wall. If you like monster collecting games for the competitive and team building elements, you'll probably like those in this game. And you can try them out free in Temtem Showdown right now. If you like them for different reasons like memorable design or stories, you might like this one, but it's a tougher sell. And if you ever wanted a Hobby Annie equivalent of this mecha anime is different from the others because it focuses on the characters and not the robots, or this Magical Girl series is different because it focuses on the characters and not the magic. Boy, oh boy, do I have something for you. Let's check out this Variety article that has an interview with the creators of the upcoming Temtem animated series.
Unlike some other shows aimed at young children, Temtem will also be character-driven, said Arthur Kalinian, producer and founder of Somewhere Animation, the studio working on Temtem. Humans and creatures have to work together towards the same goals, and sometimes they'll fight and split up, but ultimately, they have to form a team, and that's our main theme. There are emotional and humanistic aspects to our series that didn't exist in You Know Who They're Talking About, Kalinian continued. The show will also explore our relationships with animals and takes into account their consciousness and emotions. Do you get high off your own farts sniffing them like that?
Glad to know that Crema has teamed up with someone who doesn't know anything about the genre they're working on and actively disrespects it. While Crema obviously can't control everything the studio working on the animated series says as a small indie game studio, wow, it's still not a good look. The entire series that they're trying to dunk on, from Bye Bye Butterfree to Ash's departure, has been exactly that character-driven narrative they've been talking about that explores the relationship of people and monster. To say otherwise about any other series where people collect little monsters is to display willful ignorance. A trend all too common with money people. Digimon Adventure's animation budget was only a little bit more than hiring someone to come in, stand in front of the camera, and do the magic pencil trick. The only thing it could focus on was a character-driven narrative. So where does this leave Temtem? If you would like a competitive creature battler with no RNG elements, check out Temtem Showdown. It's free. I don't think you could pay me to do the grinding needed in Temtem to get to the competitive. If you're interested in the game for the MMO elements, you could like it? Although, remember, Crema is a small indie team. Massively multiplayer doesn't really fit into that well. They do their best, but they can only do so much. If you want anything else you would want in a Monster Collection game, though, eat a bowl of marshmallow mateys. They're about on par with Temtem in that department. Temtem does a lot of things well, but it also falls flat in a lot of places, being a bit too grindy and lacking the whimsy that makes this whole befriending monsters things fun. But it does have Pig Epic. And I personally think that's Pig Epic.